Michael Adams stared in disbelief as Craxon's eyes fixated on his exposed genitals. The Chalnoth researchers' initial revulsion quickly transformed into unbridled scientific curiosity, setting off a chain of events that would threaten the delicate balance between their species. Stationed on the Interspecies Research Station Gamma, Michael had never expected his routine biological survey to lead to such a compromising situation. As a human xenobiologist, he'd always dreamed of studying the elusive Chalnoth, an advanced alien race known for their prudish nature and secretive approach to reproduction. Now he found himself at the center of an unprecedented interspecies incident. The sterile lab, filled with cutting-edge equipment and genetic samples, suddenly felt claustrophobic. Craxon's scaled skin flushed a deep purple, her elongated fingers twitching as she struggled to reconcile her conservative upbringing with her newfound fascination. Michael hastily covered himself, his heart pounding as he realized the gravity of the situation. "Craxon, I can explain," he started, but the words died in his throat as the Chalnoth raised a hand to silence him. "Human Michael," Craxon's melodic voice wavered, "I request a formal study of your external reproductive organs." The implications of her request hit Michael like a plasma blast. Such a study could provide invaluable insights into Chalnoth biology, potentially revolutionizing interspecies medicine. However, it also risked shattering the fragile alliance between their peoples. News of the incident spread through the station like wildfire. Within hours, the Chalnoth High Council demanded Michael's immediate departure, citing a violation of their most sacred cultural taboos. Earth government, sensing an unprecedented opportunity for biological exchange, refused to recall him. As diplomatic tensions escalated, a more sinister plot unfolded in the shadows. A group of Chalnoth supremacists, disgusted by what they saw as a threat to their genetic purity, infiltrated the station. Their goal, to kidnap Michael for invasive experiments that would prove human inferiority once and for all. Craxon, torn between loyalty to her species and her growing friendship with Michael, uncovered the radical plot. She now faced an impossible choice: betray her own kind or allow her human friend to suffer a fate worse than death. Meanwhile, Michael grappled with the ethical implications of participating in Craxon's study. The potential scientific breakthroughs tempted him, but at what cost to interstellar relations? As if orchestrated by some cosmic jester, the station's security systems chose that moment to detect the Chalnoth infiltrators. Klaxons blared, emergency lights bathed the corridors in an eerie red glow, and impenetrable blast doors slammed shut. Michael, Craxon, and the would-be kidnappers found themselves trapped in the research sector, cut off from the outside world. To make matters worse, the station's AI began to malfunction, its circuits scrambled by sabotage. With communication to Earth severed and chaos reigning supreme, Michael and Craxon faced a daunting task. They had to find a way to survive, protect their sensitive research data, and prevent an interstellar diplomatic crisis, all while navigating the complex emotions and cultural taboos surrounding their growing attraction to each other. As alarms continued to blare and shadows danced on the walls, Michael met Craxon's alien gaze. In that moment, he knew their actions in the coming hours would determine not just their fate, but the future of human-Chalnoth relations. With a deep breath, he steeled himself for the challenges ahead, acutely aware that the thing between his legs had become the catalyst for a potential interstellar war. The blaring alarms and flashing red lights only intensified the chaos engulfing the research sector. Michael's heart raced as he assessed their dire situation. The Chalnoth radicals were closing in, and he and Craxon had nowhere left to run. "Quick, in here," Michael whispered urgently, spotting a small storage closet. He ushered Craxon inside before squeezing in himself, pulling the door shut behind them. The cramped space forced their bodies together, and Michael became acutely aware of Craxon's alien physiology. Her scaled skin felt cool against his, and he could sense her rapid breathing. Suddenly, a soft blue glow began to emanate from Craxon's body, growing brighter by the second. "What's happening?" Michael asked, his voice barely audible over the muffled alarms. Craxon's eyes widened in panic. "My bioluminescence," she hissed. "It's a stress response. I can't control it." The ethereal light threatened to expose their hiding spot. Michael's mind raced, searching for a solution. Without thinking, he quickly pulled off his shirt and draped it over Craxon, dimming the telltale glow. Craxon's gaze locked onto Michael's now exposed torso. Her initial revulsion at the sight of his bare chest and the hair covering it quickly gave way to fascination. She found herself studying the unfamiliar contours of his muscles, the rise and fall of his chest as he breathed. "Your epidermal covering," she whispered, her scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her cultural taboos. "It's so different." Michael shifted uncomfortably, acutely aware of Craxon's scrutiny. He fumbled in his pocket, retrieving a small datapad he'd managed to grab during their escape. "Let's focus on getting out of this mess," he said, his fingers flying over the device's screen. As Michael delved into the station's systems, Craxon battled her conflicting emotions. Her people's rigid beliefs about interspecies contact clashed with her growing intrigue about human physiology. She watched Michael work, noting the drive in his eyes and the beads of sweat forming on his brow. Physical responses both alien and oddly compelling. "I found something," Michael announced after several tense minutes. "The radicals introduced a virus into the station's AI. That's why everything's malfunctioning." Craxon leaned closer, her shoulder brushing against Michael's bare skin. "Can you neutralize it?" Michael shook his head. "Not from here. I need access to the main laboratory. But with those Chalnoth out there..." He trailed off, the gravity of their situation sinking in. Craxon's mind raced, weighing their limited options. An idea formed, one that both thrilled and terrified her. "I might have a solution," she said hesitantly, "but it's unorthodox." Michael met her gaze, curiosity piqued. "I'm all ears." Craxon took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Chalnoth males are highly susceptible to certain pheromones. I could produce a chemical signal that might incapacitate them long enough for us to reach the lab." Michael's eyes widened as he grasped the implications. "But wouldn't that require you to enter a state of biological stress associated with our mating rituals?" "Yes," Craxon finished, her skin flushing a deeper shade of purple. Michael hesitated, concern etched on his face. "Craxon, I can't ask you to put yourself in such a vulnerable position." "You're not asking," she replied firmly. "I'm offering. It's our best chance of survival." Before Michael could respond, the closet door flew open. Zaxthor, the leader of the Chalnoth radicals, loomed over them, flanked by two of his cohorts. Their eyes gleamed with a mixture of disgust and triumph. In that split second, Michael's body reacted instinctively. He threw himself in front of Craxon, shielding her with his bare torso. The unexpected act of selflessness stunned both Craxon and the radicals, momentarily halting their attack. Seizing the opportunity, Craxon focused her mind and body, triggering her pheromone production. A potent cloud of chemicals filled the air, causing the male Chalnoth to stagger back, disoriented. Michael sprang into action. He lunged at Zaxthor, using his smaller size and human agility to his advantage. In a flurry of movement, he managed to wrestle the advanced stun baton from Zaxthor's grasp. "Run!" Michael shouted, grabbing Craxon's hand and pulling her out of the closet. They sprinted down the corridor, alarms still blaring and emergency lights casting eerie shadows. Craxon's legs felt weak, her body overwhelmed by the chemical cocktail she'd released. She stumbled, and Michael's arm wrapped around her waist, steadying her as they ran. The physical contact sent a jolt through Craxon's system. Her scientific mind cataloged the unfamiliar sensations, the warmth of Michael's skin, the strength in his arms, the rapid beating of his heart. She found herself viewing his alien physiology in a new light, her fear giving way to a grudging admiration for his quick thinking and bravery. They reached the main laboratory, and Michael quickly ushered Craxon inside. As he barricaded the door, Craxon moved to a nearby terminal, her fingers flying over the keypad as she input her access codes to lock down the lab's entrance. Michael wasted no time. He rushed to the main computer, his fingers dancing across the keys as he began work on the countervirus. Craxon found herself drawn to observe him more closely. She noticed the intense focus in his eyes, the way his muscles tensed as he worked, the determined set of his jaw. These physical responses, so foreign yet strangely appealing, captivated her attention. Outside the lab, the sound of angry voices and pounding fists grew louder. The Chalnoth radicals had recovered from the pheromone assault and were attempting to break through the door. "How much longer?" Craxon asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "Almost there," Michael replied, not taking his eyes off the screen. "Just a few more minutes." As the tension mounted, Craxon grappled with her changing perceptions. The rigid beliefs she'd held about humans and her own species' views on biology and reproduction began to crumble in the face of this shared crisis. The pounding at the door grew more insistent. A loud crack indicated the radicals were making progress in breaching their sanctuary. Michael worked feverishly, sweat beading on his brow as he raced against time to complete the countervirus. Craxon moved closer to Michael, drawn by an impulse she didn't fully understand. "Michael," she said softly, "whatever happens, I want you to know." A thunderous boom cut her off as the lab door began to buckle under the assault. Michael's fingers flew across the keyboard, entering the final lines of code. The fate of the station and possibly interspecies relations hung in the balance as they waited to see if their desperate plan would succeed. Succeed. The computer screen flashed green, indicating the countervirus had been successfully uploaded. Michael allowed himself a brief moment of relief before turning his attention back to their immediate surroundings. The temporary reprieve was short-lived. A thunderous crack echoed through the lab as the door finally gave way under the Chalnoth radicals' relentless assault. The metal panel flew inward, narrowly missing Michael and Craxon as they dove for cover. In that instant, the station's emergency systems activated. A high-pitched whine filled the air, followed by a soft hissing sound. Michael looked up to see a fine mist spraying from the ceiling vents, quickly enveloping the room. "Decontamination protocol," he muttered, recognizing the station's automated defense mechanism. As the mist settled on their skin, Michael felt an immediate tingling sensation. Beside him, Craxon let out a startled gasp. Her scales began to shimmer, taking on an iridescent quality. "Michael," she said, her voice strained, "something's wrong. The chemicals, they're affecting me strangely." Before Michael could respond, he noticed his own clothes beginning to dissolve. The emergency chemicals designed to neutralize potential contaminants were reacting unexpectedly with his earth-based fabrics. "Damn it," he cursed, hastily stripping off his disintegrating garments. He managed to keep his underwear, but the rest of his clothing was reduced to tatters. As Michael stood there nearly naked, he became acutely aware of Craxon's gaze. Her large, alien eyes were fixed on him, pupils dilated. The mist had amplified her pheromone production, and Michael could sense a change in the air around them. "Craxon," he said softly, trying to remain calm, "are you all right?" She didn't respond immediately. Her breathing had become rapid, and her skin was flushing a deeper shade of purple. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with an emotion Michael couldn't quite identify. "Your form," Craxon said, her words coming out in a rush. "It's so different. I've never seen... I can't look away." Michael swallowed hard, suddenly very conscious of his exposed skin. He could see Craxon's struggle, her scientific curiosity warring with her ingrained cultural taboos. "It's okay," he said, adopting a clinical tone. "Human anatomy is quite different from Chalnoth physiology. Our skin is exposed, not covered in scales. We have body hair, which serves various functions." As Michael continued his impromptu biology lesson, he noticed Craxon gradually relaxing. Her initial shock gave way to genuine interest, her eyes roaming his body with a scientist's scrutiny. Their academic discussion was abruptly cut short by a savage roar from the doorway. Zaxthor, the Chalnoth radical leader, had managed to force his arm through the partially breached entrance. In his hand was a crackling stun baton, swinging wildly in their direction. Michael reacted on pure instinct. He lunged forward, tackling Craxon to the ground, just as the baton swished through the air where she had been standing. They landed hard, Michael's body covering Craxon's protectively. The sudden contact triggered an intense reaction in Craxon. Her bioluminescence flared brilliantly, bathing the room in a blinding blue light. Zaxthor recoiled, momentarily stunned by the unexpected flash. As they lay there, bodies pressed together, Michael became hyper-aware of every point of contact between them. Cracks on scales were smooth against his bare skin, and he could feel the rapid rise and fall of her chest. Her alien features were inches from his face, her eyes wide and filled with a mix of fear, confusion, and something else, something primal. Before Michael could process what was happening, Craxon closed the distance between them. Her lips, so different from a human's yet undeniably soft, pressed against his in an impulsive kiss. The sensation was electric, sending shockwaves through Michael's system. The kiss lasted only seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When they broke apart, both were breathing heavily, minds reeling from the intensity of the moment. Their shared daze was shattered by a series of violent explosions that rocked the station. Alarms blared anew as the counter-virus began to combat the Chalnoth-engineered AI corruption. Systems flickered back to life around them, screens lighting up with status reports. "The docking bay," Michael exclaimed, quickly interpreting the data. "Those explosions? It must be a rescue team from Earth." Hope surged through them both, but it was tempered by the realization of the challenges that still lay ahead. They needed to reach the docking bay, navigating through the station's labyrinthine corridors while avoiding the Chalnoth radicals. As they prepared to leave the relative safety of the lab, Craxon suddenly doubled over, clutching her midsection. "Michael," she gasped, her voice tinged with panic. "Something's happening to me. The chemicals, my elevated pheromone levels, they've triggered something, a reproductive cycle. It's not supposed to happen like this." Michael's mind raced, trying to process this new complication. He knew Chalnoth biology was complex, but he hadn't anticipated anything like this. "How serious is it?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Very," Craxon replied, her words coming in short bursts. "This only happens once in a Chalnoth's lifetime. Without proper care, within hours, I could—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. The gravity of the situation was clear. They needed to escape, and fast. Michael took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He was acutely aware of his near-nakedness, the lingering effects of the decontamination mist on his skin, and the weight of responsibility he now carried for Craxon's well-being. "We'll make it," he said, hoping he sounded more confident than he felt. "We'll get to the docking bay, find the rescue team, and get you the care you need." Craxon nodded, her eyes meeting his with a mix of trust and uncertainty. The events of the past few hours had irrevocably changed them both, challenging everything they thought they knew about each other's species. With one last look at the chaos of the lab behind them, Michael and Craxon stepped out into the corridor. The station hummed with renewed energy as systems came back online, but the threat of the Chalnoth radicals still loomed. Hand in hand, the unlikely pair began their perilous journey through the station. Every step brought new challenges, their bodies and minds pushed to the limit by the extraordinary circumstances they found themselves in. As they navigated the dangerous path to potential safety, both Michael and Craxon knew that whatever the outcome, nothing would ever be the same again. As they stepped out of the laboratory, Michael and Craxon were immediately engulfed in a hazy atmosphere. The decontamination mist continued to fall, creating an eerie, dreamlike quality to the station's corridors. Michael, still nearly naked, felt the cool droplets on his skin as they moved cautiously forward. "We need to be careful," Michael whispered, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of the Chalnoth radicals. "They're still out there, searching for us." Craxon nodded, her body tense with anticipation. As they crept through the winding passageways, she suddenly stumbled, her hand flying to her midsection. "Michael," she gasped, her voice strained, "it's getting worse." Michael turned to see Craxon's scales pulsing with an intense, erratic light. Her body radiated heat, and he could see beads of sweat forming on her brow. "Your temperature is skyrocketing," he observed, concern etched on his face. "We need to find a way to stabilize your condition." Making a split-second decision, Michael veered off their intended path. "There's a medical bay nearby. We can get supplies there to help you." They moved as quickly as they dared, Craxon leaning heavily on Michael for support. Her bioluminescence flared with each step, making stealth increasingly difficult. Upon reaching the medical bay, They found it mercifully empty. Michael sprang into action, his mind racing through his knowledge of xenobiology as he gathered supplies. "This might feel strange," he warned, applying a cool gel-like substance to Craxon's scales. "It should help regulate your body temperature and dim your bioluminescence." As Michael worked, Craxon found herself hyper-aware of his presence. His scent, unfamiliar yet oddly comforting, filled her nostrils. The gentle touch of his hands on her scales sent shivers through her body, awakening sensations she had never experienced before. "How does that feel?" Michael asked, stepping back to assess his handiwork. Craxon took a deep breath, feeling the intensity of her symptoms subside. "Better," she admitted, her eyes locked on Michael's face. "Your knowledge of Chalnoth biology is impressive." Before Michael could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Without hesitation, he grabbed Craxon's hand and pulled her into a nearby supply closet. The space was cramped, forcing their bodies close together. Michael's bare chest pressed against Craxon's scales, and she felt a surge of pheromones course through her system. In the darkness of the closet, Craxon's hand moved of its own accord, reaching out to touch Michael's chest. Her fingers traced the unfamiliar contours of his muscles, marveling at the texture of his skin and the soft hair that covered it. Michael inhaled sharply at her touch, surprised by the boldness of her action. Acting on instinct, he gently ran his hand along her arm, causing her bioluminescence to flare briefly in response. The moment was broken by the sound of the Chalnoth radicals passing by their hiding spot. As their footsteps faded, Michael and Craxon exchanged a look of shared relief and something more, a growing understanding between them. Cautiously, they emerged from the closet, only to find the station's artificial gravity beginning to malfunction. The floor beneath their feet seemed to shift and waver, making each step a challenge. "The counter-virus must be affecting the station's systems," Michael observed, grabbing onto a nearby railing for support. As they made their way through the increasingly unstable corridors, sudden shifts in gravity threatened to send them floating away. Michael used his strength to anchor them both, pulling Craxon close as they navigated the treacherous path. "Hold on tight," he instructed, guiding her through a particularly unstable section. Craxon clung to him, her earlier fear of human contact now replaced by a sense of security in his arms. As they approached the docking bay, a new sound reached their ears: human voices. Rounding a corner, they came face to face with a group of security personnel, their weapons raised. "Freeze!" shouted a woman at the front, her eyes widening at the sight of the near-naked Michael and his Chalnoth companion. "Wait!" Michael called out, raising his hands. "I'm Dr. Michael Chen, xenobiologist. This is Craxon. She's not one of the hostiles." The woman lowered her weapon slightly, her expression skeptical. "I'm Commander Sarah Collins. We received a distress signal, but we weren't expecting this." Michael quickly explained the situation: the Chalnoth radicals, the AI corruption, and their desperate escape. As he spoke, Collins's expression shifted from suspicion to understanding. "All right, Dr. Chen," she said finally. "We'll escort you and your friend to the rescue ship. My team will handle the remaining threats on the station." As they made their way to the rescue ship, Craxon felt a whirlwind of emotions: relief at their impending safety, warred with anxiety about leaving the station and facing the consequences of her actions. She found herself stealing glances at Michael, marveling at how drastically her perception of humans had changed in such a short time. Just as they reached the airlock connecting to the rescue ship, alarms blared throughout the station. A computerized voice echoed through the corridors. "Warning, critical system failures detected, emergency protocols initiated, self-destruct sequence possible." "Move now!" Collins shouted, ushering them through the airlock. As the doors sealed behind them, Michael and Craxon shared a look of mingled relief and apprehension. They had escaped immediate danger, but Craxon's condition was still progressing, and the fate of the station, and potentially human-Chalnoth relations, hung in the balance. The rescue ship rumbled to life beneath their feet, preparing for emergency departure. As they strapped themselves in, Craxon felt another wave of heat course through her body. She reached out, grasping Michael's hand tightly. "Michael," she said softly, her voice filled with a mix of fear and something else, a new, unfamiliar emotion. What happens now? Michael squeezed her hand reassuringly, his eyes meeting hers. I don't know, he admitted, but whatever comes next, we'll face it together. As the rescue ship disengaged from the station, the viewport filled with the vast expanse of space. Behind them, the station loomed, its fate uncertain. Ahead lay a future filled with questions about Chalnoth biology, interspecies relations, and the unexpected connection that had formed between a human scientist and a Chalnoth researcher. The ship's engines roared to life, propelling them away from the chaos they'd left behind and into an uncertain future. Michael and Craxon remained hand in hand, both acutely aware that their adventure was nowhere near the end. The rescue ship's engines hummed steadily as it accelerated away from the troubled space station. Michael and Craxon remained seated, their hands intertwined, both lost in thought about the uncertain future that lay ahead. Their moment of quiet contemplation was short-lived, however, as the ship's medical team burst into action. Dr. Elias Roth, the chief medical officer, approached them with a look of grit on his face. Dr. Chen, we need your expertise, and you must be Craxon. We need to get you to the medical bay immediately. Michael nodded, helping Craxon to her feet. As they made their way through the ship's corridors, he could feel the heat radiating from her body, her scales pulsing with an erratic bioluminescence. The medical bay was a flurry of activity as human doctors and nurses prepared various instruments and monitors. Craxon hesitated at the threshold, her eyes wide with apprehension. It's okay, Michael reassured her, gently guiding her inside. They're here to help. Dr. Roth wasted no time in beginning his examination. Dr. Chen, I need you to explain every detail of Chalnoth reproductive biology you know. We're flying blind here. As Michael recounted his knowledge, Dr. Roth and his team worked tirelessly to stabilize Craxon's condition. The Chalnoth female flinched as unfamiliar medical devices were attached to her body, her cultural taboos being challenged with each passing moment. I need to check your internal temperature, Dr. Roth explained, holding up a device Craxon had never seen before. This might feel a bit uncomfortable. Craxon's eyes darted to Michael, seeking reassurance. He nodded encouragingly, and she steeled herself for the examination. As the medical team worked, Craxon found her fear giving way to curiosity. Her gaze lingered on the human bodies moving around her, particularly on Michael. The subtle differences in their anatomies, once a source of terror, now fascinated her. Hours passed as Dr. Roth and his team developed a treatment plan, with Michael providing crucial insights into Chalnoth physiology. Finally, Craxon's condition began to stabilize. We've managed to slow the progression of your reproductive cycle, Dr. Roth explained, but we'll need to monitor you closely. As the medical crisis abated, a new tension arose on the bridge of the rescue ship. Lieutenant Jake Foster, the communication officer, intercepted an urgent transmission from the Chalnoth High Council. Captain Marcus Hawthorne listened intently as Foster relayed the message. Sir, the Chalnoth are demanding an immediate conference. They're claiming Craxon as a valuable asset due to her unique condition. Hawthorne's brow furrowed as he considered the implications. This could escalate quickly. We can't risk further strain on human-Chalnoth relations. He turned to his navigation officer. Set a new course. We're heading to Neutral Station Alpha for an emergency summit. As the ship altered its trajectory, Craxon was cleared to leave the medical bay. She found herself drawn to Michael, seeking him out in the ship's observation deck. Michael turned as she entered, a smile brightening his features. How are you feeling? Better, Craxon replied, moving closer. Thanks to you and your team. She paused, her scales shifting colors in a way Michael now recognized as nervousness. I have questions. About humans. About you. Michael nodded, encouraging her to continue. Your mating practices, Craxon blurted out, her scientific curiosity overriding her embarrassment. How do they work? Your anatomy is so different from ours. Michael felt heat rise to his cheeks, caught off guard by her directness. He took a deep breath, carefully considering his words. Well, human reproduction is a complex process involving... As Michael explained, trying to balance scientific accuracy with cultural sensitivity, Craxon listened intently. Her eyes roamed over his body, seeing it with new understanding. Their conversation was abruptly cut short by a blaring alarm. Captain Hawthorne's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "All hands, this is not a drill. We have Chalnoth intruders on board, initiating emergency lockdown procedures." Michael's eyes widened in shock. The radicals! They must have smuggled themselves aboard somehow. As the ship descended into chaos, Michael grabbed Craxon's hand. "We need to find a safe place to hide." They raced through the corridors, the sounds of conflict echoing around them. Rounding a corner, they found themselves face to face with a group of armed Chalnoth, led by a familiar figure, Zaxthor. "There they are!" Zaxthor shouted, raising his weapon. Michael reacted instinctively, pulling Craxon into a nearby maintenance shaft. The door slid shut behind them, just as energy blasts impacted the outer hull. They found themselves in a cramped, dimly lit space, their bodies pressed close together. Craxon's scales pulsed with renewed intensity, her accelerated biology responding to the stress and proximity. Michael became acutely aware of every point of contact between them. The heat of Craxon's body, the softness of her scales against his skin, the rapid beat of her alien heart. It all combined to awaken a primal response in him. Craxon felt it too, her earlier scientific curiosity giving way to raw desire. Her hand moved of its own accord, tracing the contours of Michael's chest. Just as the tension between them reached its peak, the artificial gravity in their small hideaway failed. They found themselves floating, their bodies drifting even closer in the zero-gravity environment. Michael and Craxon locked eyes, both breathing heavily. The alarms continued to blare, reminding them of the danger that lurked just outside their temporary sanctuary. Yet in this moment, suspended in space and time, they faced a different kind of challenge, one that could potentially alter the course of their lives and interspecies relations forever. As they floated there, caught between desire and duty, Michael and Craxon knew they had to make a choice. The consequences of their decision would ripple far beyond this maintenance shaft, affecting not just their own futures, but potentially the future of human-Chalnoth relations as well. As they floated there, caught between desire and duty, Michael and Craxon knew they had to make a choice. The consequences of their decision would ripple far beyond this maintenance shaft, affecting not just their own futures, but potentially the future of human-Chalnoth relations as well. Michael took a deep breath, steadying himself in the zero-gravity environment. "Craxon, we can't. Not now. We have to focus on stopping these attackers." Craxon nodded, her scales dimming slightly as she regained her composure. "You're right. Our people need us." They disentangled themselves, pushing off the walls of the maintenance shaft to create some distance between them. Michael's mind raced, analyzing their options. "The ventilation system," he said suddenly. "We can use it to reach the environmental control room. If we can alter the atmosphere, we might be able to incapacitate the Chalnoth without harming the humans." Craxon's eyes widened. "Brilliant. Chalnoth respiratory systems are more sensitive to certain gases than humans. If we can introduce the right compound—" "Exactly," Michael nodded. "Can you lead us there?" Craxon's scales pulsed with a soft blue glow, illuminating the dark maintenance shaft. "Follow me." They pried open an access panel, revealing a network of narrow ducts. Michael went first, his lean frame allowing him to navigate the tight spaces with relative ease. Craxon followed, her bioluminescence casting eerie shadows as they crawled through the ship's innards. As they moved, Michael couldn't help but be acutely aware of Craxon's presence behind him. The heat from her body, the soft scraping of her scales against the metal ducts, the quiet sound of her breathing, it all served to remind him of their interrupted moment earlier. They reached a junction and Craxon whispered directions. "Left here, then 2 rights. We're getting close." As they neared the environmental control room, they heard muffled voices. Michael held up a hand, signaling Craxon to stop. They peered through a ventilation grate, seeing 2 armed Chalnoth guarding the entrance. Michael turned to Craxon, his voice barely audible. "I'll take them by surprise. Can you help?" Craxon hesitated for a moment, then nodded resolutely. I know their weak points. I'll assist. With a swift kick, Michael dislodged the grate and launched himself at the nearest guard. His fist connected with the Chalnoth's jaw, sending the alien staggering backward. The second guard raised his weapon, but Kraxon was already moving. She darted forward, her fingers finding a pressure point at the base of the Chalnoth's neck. The guard's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. Michael grappled with the first guard, their bodies twisting in the low-gravity environment. He managed to pin the Chalnoth against a wall, but the alien's superior strength was proving difficult to overcome. "Kraxon!" Michael called out, struggling to maintain his hold. She was there in an instant, her hands finding another pressure point. The guard went limp, and Michael let him float gently to the floor. "Nice work," he panted, flashing Kraxon a grin. They entered the control room, quickly assessing the various screens and panels before them. Michael's fingers flew over the controls, adjusting oxygen levels and introducing a mild sedative gas into the ship's atmosphere. "This should weaken the Chalnoth throughout the ship," he explained. "It won't knock them out completely, but it'll give our security teams an edge." Kraxon watched in fascination as Michael worked, admiring his quick thinking and adaptability. She felt a swell of pride in their partnership, a sense of rightness in their collaboration despite their differences. Their moment of triumph was short-lived. The door to the control room hissed open, revealing a tall, imposing figure. Zaxthor stood in the doorway, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene before him. "You!" he snarled, leveling an energy weapon at them. "I should have known you'd be behind this." Michael stepped protectively in front of Kraxon, his body tense and ready for action. Zaxthor's gaze flickered between them, a look of disgust crossing his features. "Kraxon," Zaxthor said, his voice taking on a cajoling tone, "you must return with us. Your condition, it could revolutionize our entire species. Imagine a world where our people are no longer bound by rigid mating cycles. You could be the key to our evolution." Kraxon felt torn. Her sense of duty to her people warred with her newfound feelings for Michael and her growing distrust of Zaxthor's radical methods. Michael, sensing her internal struggle, spoke up. "Kraxon is not your property. She has the right to make her own choices." Zaxthor's face contorted with rage. He raised his weapon, finger tightening on the trigger. In that moment, Kraxon made her decision. She stepped forward, her body beginning to emit a potent cocktail of pheromones. The air in the room grew thick and heady. Zaxthor's eyes widened, his grip on the weapon loosening as the pheromones overwhelmed his senses. He swayed on his feet, disoriented and confused. Michael seized the opportunity. He lunged forward, tackling Zaxthor to the ground. The energy weapon skittered across the floor, out of reach. They grappled, Michael using every ounce of his strength and combat training to subdue the larger alien. Kraxon joined the fray, her knowledge of Chalnoth physiology proving invaluable. Together they managed to restrain Zaxthor, using cables from a nearby console to bind him securely. As they caught their breath, the door to the control room opened once again. This time it was Commander Collins and her security team, weapons at the ready. "Dr. Chen Kraxon," Collins said, taking in the scene with a raised eyebrow. "I see you've been busy." Michael nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "We managed to alter the ship's atmosphere. It should have weakened the other intruders." Collins smiled grimly. "It did. We've rounded up the rest of them. The ship is secure." As the security team took custody of Zaxthor, Captain Hawthorne's voice came over the intercom. "Attention all personnel. We are approaching Neutral Station Alpha for the emergency summit. All senior staff report to the briefing room immediately." Michael and Kraxon shared a look, both exhilarated and exhausted from their ordeal. As they made their way to the briefing room, Kraxon suddenly stumbled, a wave of heat washing over her body. "Kraxon?" Michael asked, concern evident in his voice. She steadied herself against the wall, her scales pulsing rapidly. I think my condition is progressing. We may not have much time." Michael took her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "We'll figure this out, together." As they entered the briefing room, they could see the neutral space station looming large in the viewport. Representatives from Earth and the Chalnoth High Council would be waiting, unaware of the dramatic events that had unfolded on the rescue ship. Michael and Craxon took their seats at the conference table, acutely aware of the challenges that lay ahead. They would need to navigate complex diplomatic negotiations, confront the implications of their growing relationship, and find a solution to Craxon's accelerating biology, all while the fate of human-Chalnoth relations hung in the balance. Captain Hawthorne cleared his throat, bringing the room to attention. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot to discuss in very little time. Let's begin. Captain Hawthorne had barely begun the briefing when the rescue ship shuddered, signaling its docking with Neutral Station Alpha. A flurry of activity erupted as medical personnel rushed into the room. Dr. Chen, Craxon, you need to come with us immediately, a stern-faced human doctor announced. Michael helped Craxon to her feet, supporting her as they followed the medical team. The corridors blurred past them as they were whisked to a secure medical facility. The air hummed with tension and urgency. Inside, they found themselves face-to-face with Dr. Roth, a renowned xenobiologist. His team of human and Chalnoth specialists bustled around the room, preparing equipment and reviewing data. We need to stabilize your condition, Craxon, Dr. Roth explained, gesturing for her to lie on a specialized examination table. Your accelerated reproductive cycle presents unique challenges and opportunities. As the medical team began their work, Michael stood nearby, his brow furrowed with concern. He watched as they administered a cocktail of drugs and used advanced scanning equipment to monitor Craxon's vital signs. Hours passed in a whirlwind of tests and treatments. Michael paced the room, occasionally catching snippets of excited conversation among the scientists. The genetic markers are unlike anything we've seen before, one Chalnoth researcher murmured. This could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies biology, a human scientist replied. Finally, Dr. Roth approached Michael, his expression a mix of excitement and apprehension. We've managed to stabilize Craxon's condition, but a permanent solution eludes us. However, we've discovered something extraordinary. Michael leaned in, his heart racing. What is it? Craxon's unique biological state has created an unprecedented opportunity for interspecies genetic research, Dr. Roth explained. We believe there might be a way to not only cure her condition, but also bridge the gap between human and Chalnoth biology. Before Dr. Roth could elaborate, alarms blared throughout the station. Security personnel rushed past the medical bay, their weapons at the ready. What's happening? Michael demanded. A nurse quickly checked a nearby monitor. There's been an incident in the diplomatic sector. Chalnoth extremists have infiltrated the station. Michael's mind raced. He knew Zaxthor and his captured followers were being held in a high-security area, but it seemed other radical factions had decided to make their move. Dr. Roth's voice cut through the chaos. We need to proceed with our treatment plan immediately. The station's compromised, and we may not get another chance. He turned to Michael and Craxon, his expression grave. I have a proposal, but it's unconventional. We believe a controlled mating attempt between you two could provide the key to stabilizing Craxon's condition and advancing our research. Michael blinked, stunned. He looked at Craxon, who appeared equally shocked. Her scales pulsed rapidly, a sign of her heightened emotional state. Is that even possible? Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Roth nodded. Theoretically, yes, but it's never been attempted before. The potential risks and rewards are enormous. Craxon spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. I'm willing to try, for the sake of science, for our peoples, and... She glanced at Michael, her scales flushing a deep blue. For us. Michael took a deep breath, weighing the gravity of the situation. The sounds of conflict echoed in the distance, a reminder of the precarious position they were in. All right, he said finally, I consent. Dr. Roth wasted no time. He led them to a specially designed chamber adjacent to the medical bay. The room was a marvel of engineering, with adaptable environmental controls and advanced monitoring systems. This chamber will allow us to create the optimal conditions for your encounter, Dr. Roth explained as they entered. We'll be monitoring everything to ensure your safety and gather crucial data. As the door sealed behind them, Michael and Craxon found themselves alone in the chamber. The air shimmered as environmental controls kicked in, creating a perfect balance between human and Chalnoth atmospheric needs. Michael approached Craxon, taking her hands in his. Her scales were warm to the touch, pulsing with a soft, inviting glow. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly. Craxon nodded, her alien features softening. "I am. Are you?" Before Michael could respond, the chamber shook violently. Alarms blared, and the sound of energy weapons discharging filled the air. Dr. Roth's voice came through the intercom, filled with static and urgency. "The extremists have breached our sector. We're initiating emergency protocols. The chamber will remain sealed for your protection. Proceed with the experiment if you can. It may be our only chance." The intercom cut out, leaving Michael and Craxon in sudden silence. They looked at each other, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. "Well," Michael said, attempting a smile, "I guess it's now or never." Craxon's scales rippled with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. "Indeed. Shall we begin?" As they moved closer, the chamber's systems hummed to life. Soft lighting adjusted to their movements, and sensors captured every detail of their interaction. Outside, chaos reigned as Commander Collins and her security team battled the Chalnoth extremists. The fate of the station, the experiment, and possibly the future of human-Chalnoth relations hung in the balance. But inside the chamber, Michael and Craxon focused only on each other. As their bodies met, two vastly different species coming together in an unprecedented union, they embarked on a journey into the unknown. Their every touch, every reaction, every moment of intimate connection held the potential to reshape the understanding between their peoples. The experiment had begun, and with it, a new chapter in the story of humanity and the Chalnoth. Chalnoth as the moment of truth arrived. The chamber's environmental controls hummed softly, creating a perfect balance between their atmospheric needs. The air shimmered with a mix of human and Chalnoth pheromones, heightening their senses and intensifying their connection. Michael reached out, gently tracing the intricate patterns on Craxon's scales. Her bioluminescence pulsed in response, casting a soft, otherworldly glow throughout the chamber. Craxon's eyes, multifaceted and alien, met Michael's gaze with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. "Are you ready?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Craxon nodded, her scales rippling with a cascade of colors. "Yes," she replied, her voice a melodious trill. "Let us begin." As they embraced, the chaos outside the chamber faded away. The sounds of battle became distant echoes, inconsequential compared to the momentous event unfolding within. Their initial touches were hesitant, exploratory. Michael marveled at the smooth, cool texture of Craxon's scales, so different from human skin, yet incredibly sensitive. Craxon, in turn, was fascinated by the warmth of Michael's body, the softness of his skin, and the strange patches of hair that were so alien to her species. As their intimacy deepened, something extraordinary began to occur. Craxon's bioluminescence intensified, pulsing in sync with her accelerated heartbeat. The air around them seemed to shimmer and twist, as if reality itself was bending to accommodate their unprecedented union. Michael gasped as he felt a tingling sensation spread throughout his body. "Craxon," he breathed, "do you feel that?" Craxon's eyes widened, her pupils dilating. "Yes," she responded, her voice filled with wonder. "It's incredible." A swirling bioluminescent aura began to form around them, enveloping their bodies in a cocoon of pulsating energy. As their physical forms merged, Michael felt as if he was dissolving, his consciousness expanding to encompass Craxon's alien perspective. In turn, Craxon experienced a rush of human emotions, complex and layered in ways she had never known. Outside the chamber, Dr. Roth and his team watched in awe as their instruments recorded unprecedented levels of bioenergetic activity. Graphs spiked, readings went off the charts, and alarms blared as the equipment struggled to process the data it was receiving. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Roth murmured, his eyes glued to the screens. "We're witnessing something that defies all our previous understanding of xenobiology." Inside the chamber, Michael and Craxon were lost in their shared experience. oblivious to the scientific breakthrough they were creating. Their bodies seemed to merge at a cellular level, human and Chalnoth DNA intertwining in ways that should have been impossible. As their encounter reached its pinnacle, a burst of energy erupted from their joined forms. The chamber's walls vibrated, and for a moment the entire station seemed to hold its breath. Then darkness. The power systems throughout Neutral Station Alpha flickered and died, plunging everything into momentary blackness. In the diplomatic sector, the battle between Commander Collins's security team and the Chalnoth extremists came to an abrupt halt as both sides found themselves disoriented by the sudden loss of power. Seconds later, emergency systems kicked in and power was restored. In the medical bay, Dr. Roth and his team scrambled to reboot their equipment, eager to see what had transpired in those crucial moments. As the chamber's seal disengaged with a soft hiss, Michael and Craxton emerged, leaning on each other for support. They were physically exhausted, but their eyes shone with a new light, a perfect blend of human purpose and Chalnoth wisdom. Dr. Roth rushed forward, medical scanner in hand. "How do you feel?" he asked, running the device over both of them. Michael looked at Craxton, a smile playing on his lips. "Different," he replied. "But good. Very good." Craxton nodded in agreement, her scales shimmering with a new, more vibrant pattern. "I feel complete," she added, her voice carrying a new resonance. As the medical team began their examinations, news of the experiment's apparent success spread throughout the station. In the diplomatic sector, the fighting ceased as both humans and Chalnoth received word of the unprecedented event that had just occurred. Commander Collins, her uniform singed from energy weapon fire, approached a group of Chalnoth extremists. "I think," she said, holstering her weapon, "we all need to rethink our positions here." The lead Chalnoth, his crest lowered in a sign of acquiescence, nodded slowly. "Perhaps," he rumbled, "it is time for us to listen rather than fight." Back in the medical bay, Dr. Roth's excitement grew with each new piece of data. "This is remarkable," he announced to the assembled team. "Craxton's accelerated reproductive cycle has stabilized completely, and both of them, their genetic structure has been altered in ways we never thought possible." Michael and Craxton exchanged glances, their hands intertwined. They could feel the changes within them: enhanced strength, sharpened senses, and a deep, unshakable connection to each other. As word of their successful union spread, the mood on Neutral Station Alpha transformed. The diplomatic summit, which had teetered on the brink of collapse, was reborn as a celebration of a new era in human-Chalnoth relations. Representatives from both species gathered in the station's main hall, eager to hear from the couple who had bridged the gap between their worlds. As Michael and Craxton entered the room, a hush fell over the crowd. They stood together, a living symbol of what was possible when fear and mistrust were set aside. Michael cleared his throat, addressing the assembled diplomats. "What happened today wasn't just about us," he began, his voice strong and clear. "It's about the future we can build together." Craxton continued, her melodious voice perfectly complementing Michael's. "We have proven that our differences are not barriers, but opportunities. Let this be the beginning of a new chapter in our shared history." As applause filled the hall, Michael and Craxton knew that their journey was just getting started. They had opened a door to a future filled with possibilities, challenges, and opportunities. Together, they would navigate this new frontier, ambassadors of a shared destiny that neither of them could have imagined when their paths first crossed.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.